This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast revisiting television sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between. This week, Kolchak the Night Stalker, episodes 19 and 20.
Nowhere in man's history does he display more tenacity, more perseverance than in his search for eternal youth. Halting the relentless process of aging has been a constant dream of man's and of woman's.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that stalked its last night. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
I wound up with a real bow wow last night.
Was that on this episode?
Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah, for for episode 18,
they
beat
that
drunk guy,
of the feed company,
and he ended up with a real bow wow.
Some real misogyny in these episodes.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a weird trend for Kolchak in the latter half of the episodes, but I mean, this character was just there to be like, bow wow.
Well, that's it. This is it. We're in the final podcast on Kolchak, Jordan.
This is it. Can you believe we watched 20 episodes of the show?
We've done it. We've watched the entire set.
Yeah, we never jumped ship. We stuck to our reins.
I even watched the 2 movies.
Oh, I know you watched. Yeah, that's right. You watched more. You watched everything there is to about Kolchak. You just need to read the comics and any sort of novelizations. And
I'm gonna play the video game afterward.
Is there a video game?
No, but that'd be great, right?
I could see it. I could see like a Nintendo game.
Yeah, he's jumping on platforms.
Exactly.
Snapping photos.
He's throwing his hat. Remember Michael Jackson's game Moonwalker? What was the game?
Moonwalker. I don't think I ever played it, but I'm aware of it.
I'm mixing it up with Moonraker, the James Bond movie. Yeah, Moonwalker, and it was just a lot of him like and like throwing his hat and stuff and dancing. And I thought,
it was just like beeps and bops though.
Well, it was him in a little white outfit, his like smooth criminal outfit, and I don't know what he was fighting. I'm assuming police officers with subpoenas.
Your favorite game as a child was this game?
No, I never played it. I just remember seeing it.
Well, I don't know how we got on this topic exactly, but let's talk about the end of Kolchak.
Okay, sure.
So I'm sure you know a little bit about this, and I think we've talked a little bit over the course of our viewings of Kolchak, but I was kind of looking at kind of how it all came to an end, and there's a few things kind of coalesced together. I mean, one of them was that the show was kind of in a bad time slot for the first half of its run. I believe it was Fridays at 10 p.m.
That is the death spot, isn't it?
Not great, and eventually it was moved, I think, after the first half to like Fridays at 8 p.m., but I don't know if that was like a huge improvement on its previous time slot.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I think this is what we have discussed specifically, is that Darren McGavin ended up being pretty unhappy how it became a Monster of the Week formula, and it was just like not really working story-wise for him, and then I guess the shooting schedule was quite exhausting.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, we've touched on this over the last 10 weeks, I guess, we've been doing Kolchak. I get the criticism of the Monster of the Week, and we've talked about it, that I think it's maybe too easy an excuse because I think it works well a lot of the time, and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm not. It's not as if the show started out as one thing and then became something else. It's like we watched Galactica in 1980. That very quickly became like kids watching Super Scouts or whatever, right? Like I can see you being an actor and irritated at a show becoming something different than what it was. But Kolchak, for the most part, by episode 20 is the same as it was in episode 1. So I don't know, maybe it's just like the accumulation of seeing this week after week.
Well, I think you'd agree that the Monster of the Week formula has rarely gotten better. If anything, it's kind of gotten lazier.
I would agree with that, but it's not as if it's not what he signed up for, I guess, is my point.
I guess so, but I think when you sign up for it, you don't expect it to be like every episode to be a carbon copy of the previous episode. Like, it's one thing to say you are going to have a Monster of the Week, but it's another thing to say it's just like, we're going to also do all the same beats over and over and over again.
I would agree with that. That is maybe the show's biggest drawback, is that you do start, as a viewer, start getting a little bored because you know exactly what's going to happen. They don't want to change the format at all. And it starts getting a little tiring because you're just waiting for him to get the little bit of information to get where he's got to have this essentially fight with this bad guy at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting, though, because he asked to be released from the show. I guess the ratings weren't very good, and he kind of went to the network and said, let's just, like, call it off. Because they had a 26-episode order, and they called it off at 20. And it's interesting to hear that he had enough star power, or at least the show was doing so poorly that he was able to walk in and say, let's just end it, and they agreed.
I mean, it might have just been a money thing where he's just like, look, it's not doing well. I don't really want to do it. And they thought, well, that's 6 episodes we can save money, we can throw into whatever variety show is popular at the time.
Absolutely. But I mean, it's interesting to hear that an actor could walk in and just be like, let's what are we doing here, everybody? Let's call it off.
Yeah.
Of the 20 episodes, apparently there were 6 additional scripts written because they were going to do 26 scripts. Apparently only really 3 of those scripts kind of have been released to the public or exist in like the public consciousness. So I've kind of gotten them written down, like what the three of the other 6 would have been.
Okay.
One of them we've talked about briefly in the last episode. The I'm not going to pronounce any of these words. The Git of Bielia. I don't know.
Oh, what's that?
This was the one that was set in West Virginia during a miners' strike that Kolchak goes to cover, where he discovers a backwoods family with an inbred monster who commits gruesome murders.
Right. You mentioned that last week, and we compared it to that horrible X-Files episode.
Yes. I mean, I would have been very curious as to how Kolchak handled that, because it seems like a pretty grim subject to do.
That is one thing, and I'm sure it's budgetary restraints, but this show would have been great if Karl could have traveled more. I can only think of one episode where he actually traveled, where they were down in Mexico, and it seems just built in the show that you could have these great locales and, you know, I mean, the X-Files did. It was funny because it was always clearly Vancouver, but to have him travel around even just the United States would have been nice.
Yeah. I mean, another one of those things. I think we've pinpointed a number of ways this show could have improved itself, like a little bit of travel, more character development, other characters coming involved. You know, it wasn't clearly not what they were trying to do, and hence why even Darren McGavin himself wanted to quit.
Right.
Another episode was called Eve of Terror.
Oh, I like that title.
This one would have very much put Kolchak on the clearly direction it was headed to, as the premise of it was a deranged feminist.
That's pretty good. I assumed it was Eve, as in Adam and Eve, and she's still around, and for some reason she I don't know, she's got a bone to pick.
I mean, all I could find was it just mentioned that a deranged feminist kills a bunch of people, and they didn't go into any more detail. So maybe that was the reveal at the end, that it was Eve of Adam and Eve all along. Who knows?
Right. Yeah, that sounds like a terrible episode.
Yeah, I mean, that one is like the one before. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and then this one, I'm like, well, cancel this show.
That, you know what though? That seems about on par with how at least I felt the last probably the second half of this show. Is like one episode you're like, and the next one you're like, ooh, not so good. Then you're like, oh, this one's not so bad. And then, ooh, bad. It's almost every other episode.
Well, this last one teases us with something we've kind of been hoping for this whole show, but I'm sure they wouldn't have done it at all. But it was called The Executioners, and it was Kolchak has to write for the arts column and discovers a painting is tied to a series of murders that Vincenzo is investigating. And then Kolchak has to try to unravel the bizarre murders without alerting Vincenzo to his involvement. That
sounds fun.
I mean, unfortunately, Vincenzo would never actually be on. They would just like never cut back to Vincenzo, which is the thing that would make it good. But
it also sounds a little bit like Ghostbusters 2 with Vigo. Remember the painting?
They're just leaning into the fact that Kolchak solves everything by finding a painting on a wall.
It's true. That's a weird thing to have gone back to several times, that he happens to see a painting that gives him the information.
He needs to see something that jogs his memory, and they're like, what could it be? Probably a painting on a wall.
Yeah.
At any rate, ABC would eventually, after it was canceled, cobble a couple of the episodes together to TV movies. Do you want to hear the names of the TV movies, and you can try to guess which episodes they were cobbled together out of?
I'd love to. You know, let me ask you, I would assume they'd be about 2 episodes, or is it 3 episodes they cobbled together?
Exactly. 2 episodes cobbled into a TV movie.
Okay.
It was The Demon and the Mummy.
The Demon and the Mummy. That would be the one with the dog demon?
Nope.
Oh. What other demon was there? I can't think of any other demons. Oh wait, was it? Oh no, those were witches. Tell me, I can't remember.
It was the succubus episode we just watched where they went to college and killed all those frat boys.
Uh-huh.
And then the mummy would have been the one with the Aztec mummy from last week.
Oh, those were put together as one thing, huh?
Yeah. That was somehow I've only, I think, in passing ever watched any of these like cobbled together movies. So I have trouble. I feel like they must just be like episodes with like the most vague narration like connecting them.
Yeah, because I don't know how you would edit these in a way that it would be one proper storyline, as opposed to like at the beginning of the episode he's like, 2 weird things happened this week, you know?
Yeah, my guess is that's exactly how it worked. And then the second one was called Crackle of Death.
That's the best title yet so far.
It wasn't it. I thought I always realized the mummy and the demon is such a letdown if you're going to have one called the Crackle of Death.
Yeah, and what Crackle of Death is Crackle of Death. So I wonder if it's a sound related one. It is. I'm gonna guess. I'm just gonna throw it out there, and I don't think it is. I think it's gonna be the horrible indigenous episode, and then I'm gonna also mix it with, just to double down on racism, I'm gonna go with the East Indian episode.
No, I'm afraid not. These are actually 2 episodes I think I kind of liked, so maybe I would have been into this particular TV movie. But they combined Firefall, the episode with the ghost who lit people on fire.
Yeah,
and
that was a highlight.
The Energy Eater, the one with the invisible monster in the basement that ate electricity.
Oh, okay. That one I didn't like as well, but I understand better why those 2 episodes would go together, because they're both this sort of like mysterious entity.
They're far more spooky. Though they should have done both. They should have done the invisible alien and the invisible energy eater together.
Yeah.
Could have been called the Invisibles.
Or the invisible killer. Or
actually, maybe you could actually cut those 2 together into one story if you just cut out like it's all about the alien and you just pretend the alien also went to a hospital.
Right. You just cut out some of those scenes of like the walls cracking. I remember there was like 10 minutes of just walls cracking.
This is the best part, the walls cracking.
Let me just mention real quick. In these episodes, in the second episode, episode 19, I mentioned this once before, and it's been a thing I've noticed in Kolchak, is that I can tell when the episodes are running short because they have super long extended sequences of him driving, and in the second episode they have an extended thing of him driving, and then also there's a scene where the police get out of their cars and walk into a building and then into the lobby, and I clocked it at over 30 seconds and it's literally just people walking, and I was like, oh, short episode.
Filling time. Well, I'll wrap this up quickly here, my little thing about the end of Kolchak. In the end, after it was sort of canceled, it ended up being resurrected in reruns in 1979. And I think they put it as part of like a late show, one of the episodes, and it did well, so they started bringing it back. And it actually kind of had 3 rerun revivals. Once in 1979, they brought it back and were surprised to see how well it did. Then they brought it back again in 1981 for another series of reruns, which was also successful. And then finally, they brought it back in 1987 for another kind of round of reruns that apparently all these times were actually quite ratings-wise successful.
Maybe it was just a bit of a, too early for its for own good, like maybe it just would have hit better a few years later.
Yeah, and it was eventually remade in 2005 as a TV series called The Night Stalker. Did not fare much better. I believe it was canceled. Only 6 episodes of 10 ever aired.
We should try watching it sometime.
Yeah, I think one day we'll get to Night Stalker, eh?
Yeah. All I know of Night Stalker is, I don't think as you mentioned, it wasn't terribly well received, but looking through fan fiction, I have found some people who seem to be a fan of that version of Kolchak because their stories are written in that universe. So some people like it.
Oh, there you go. And I mean, there was also one close call where it was nearly turned into a feature film. In 2012, apparently, Disney announced a never-produced Kolchak film. It was going to be directed by Edgar Wright and starring Johnny Depp.
Wow. You know what's funny, because I know we're going to talk about this shortly, of doing a recast, spoiler, is that he was one of that I dropped off my list. He was one of the people I was like, maybe that's who could play Kolchak.
Well, Johnny Depp's out now. He's not getting any more things. So.
No, it's not happening now, which is one of the reasons I was like, I don't think maybe 2022 I'm going to put Johnny Depp in.
Well, that's it. That was my segue, Jordan. We're gonna go in and do a little game. We're gonna recast Kolchak as a major motion picture for the modern era. So let's begin, Jordan. Who would you cast? I know you're not going to cast Johnny Depp now, but who would you cast as Karl Kolchak?
Okay, this is a very rare thing, but I have 3 people, and I want to discuss them with you because this will kind of dictate what the rest of the movie is. So I have 3 kind of, maybe these people would work. So I'll give you one, you give me, and then we'll go back and forth. So the first person I picked, and I'm not even that confident in it because he's now just like a Marvel guy and he doesn't actually make movies anymore. But at one point, I thought he was a pretty strong actor and made interesting movies, and that's Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. I mean, I could see a modern version of this. Like this is like his Doolittle movie.
I just thought kind of like a rumpled investigator sort of thing. But again, I just don't know if he's that interested in making movies anymore as much as...
Yeah, I mean, we definitely would just get mugging Downey Jr.
Exactly, yeah, the latter half of his career. But what do you think? Who would you pick?
It was a tough one because, like, Darren McGavin is clearly, like, the perfect person for this role. So I was trying to think who can bring... Because, you know, he's kind of got that gruff detective thing. Well, actually you're not able to take him that seriously, so it gives you, like, it makes him a bit of a lovable loser most of the time, even though, like, I think he would think of himself as more than that. So I was really trying to find a person who can walk that line of kind of like gruff hero who's actually a bit of a loser who you are always cheering for.
Yeah.
And I think there is one person who could do it, and it's Sam Rockwell.
Oh, you know what? That's an excellent pick. It's better than my other 2. So I'm with Sam Rockwell all the way. That's a great pick.
Yeah, it was
a
tough.
Great pick.
I have another pick who I like too, but it's just something about Sam Rockwell. He really is the only guy I can see playing a David McGarren character. Like there's something about the two of them that fit well.
I think I had someone along that line, but not as good as Sam Rockwell, and that was Ben Stiller. I had on my list as well.
Oh, interesting. An old Ben Stiller. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, and then my third was a wild card. Are you ready?
Yeah, do it.
Nicolas Cage. I know it's not going to be that, but I just thought there was something. I'm like, well, let's just throw stuff at the wall.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You could do a bunch of, like, you make it very crazy then and just have Nicolas Cage just bouncing off the walls. Maybe not quite like the Kolchak we know, but it'd be a whole new Kolchak.
But you have another pick, right? I don't think it's going to be better than Sam Rockwell, though.
Mine is a bit of an outlier. He's not as big a movie star. You pick some big movie stars. I went with, do you know Steven Yeun?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he's in Walking Dead and... what's it called? Minari,
I think.
Minari, thank you. And I was like, he is maybe not as comical, but he has that kind of beat down kind of detective look. And I was like, I think he'd make an interesting Kolchak.
It's an interesting choice. I think though for this role, I think it's hard to beat Sam Rockwell. I think it's such a good pick.
Here's the thing. I also agree. Unfortunately, I think Sam Rockwell is kind of like, he's a hard man not to be like, I could see him in that. Like, you put that hat on him and he's there already.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's. That's done. That's a done deal. Contract's out. We're just waiting for his agent to sign. We've got now Tony Vincenzo.
Yes, Tony Vincenzo. I can start us this time. Again, I was like trying to find the right actor for this kind of like boss who has no power and is always beat down, but is always trying his best to get but is, genuine. I don't want him to be a hard ass. I want him to be a genuine nice guy. So I got 2 options here. I went with Bob Odenkirk.
Okay. All right. That's pretty good.
I could see that. And then I picked, and this might need some explaining, but do you know Stephen McKinley Henderson?
Not by the name. What would I know him from?
He's an older black actor. You would have seen him most recently in Dune. He was the human computer who was always he's a very lovable. He's a bigger man. He's quite a bit older. I
know who he is. Yeah. Okay.
He's in a lot of things. He's a real character actor. It's interesting. I don't think he'd be quite the hard ass Vincenzo, but I could really see him being a flustered nice boss trying to do his best, but just constantly being Kolchak.
And who's your first pick again?
Bob Odenkirk, of course, from Better Call Saul and Bob and Doug. Was that what it was called? No, that was wrong. Not Bob and Doug.
I have two other picks, and these are all over the place. So it's funny when a character, it's like whoever's available. My first one was Danny DeVito.
Oh, that's a pretty fun one, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought I could see him being pretty flustered at all times by Kolchak, and then I thought I'd go in a slightly different direction and have a little bit more authority, and that's Forrest Whitaker.
Oh, Forrest Whitaker. That's an interesting one, too.
I know, it's different. It'd make the character a lot different. It'd be less of a joke and more of... You'd have to really kind of lean more into this sort of like frustration of the actual legality issues that Kolchak brings up.
You know what? I'm interested in Forrest Whitaker because I actually think he could probably be quite funny, too, if, like, given the right material. It'd be an interesting, like... I think he could be a good Vincenzo potentially.
Yeah, do you think Forrest? I'm kind of agnostic. Whatever you think.
I mean, I think they're all interesting choices. Like Danny DeVito's interesting. He's gotten so much older, and he's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just hard to. I'm having trying to picture him in this role. Like, I think I could imagine like younger Danny DeVito in this role, but now he feels like he's like.
It might be where I'm picturing. I might be picturing, Taxi era version of him, but. And not Sunny Day, whatever that show's called.
Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
But yeah, that's the one.
Let's see what old Forrest Whitaker can do for us.
Okay. All right. Contract's out. Now, Ron Updike. Another odd character because the casting will dictate how kind of silly this character is or how much weight the role has.
Yeah, this was a tough one. I've got two very disparate choices who I think
so do I.
Both could be good, and I kind of leaned into him being a bit more on the kind of like nebbish side that like leans into that, but I think both go different ways on that nebbishness.
Yeah. I picked one person that you should really hate and one person you kind of on his side.
All right, you want to start us off this time?
Okay, the person I picked simply so that the viewers would be like, I can't stand this guy. Maybe a little too old for the role, but maybe change it a little bit and make it a little prim and proper. Hugh Grant.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think he could be a role where you just get really irritated at him.
I think I've got a similar thought process. Not exactly, but I think this actor would also fill the same kind of role as a Hugh Grant potentially. But Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength. We're just thinking that sort of like, it's just that British voice comes in is like, excuse me, and yeah, I get it.
Yeah, you get the mustache on him, and he's always like constantly like talking about like he's basically Frasier. He's always talking about the nice things in Chicago, but he's always having to deal with the slob. They're a real odd couple, I think, in this movie.
Yeah, that's a good one. My second one is changing things up. It's you'll see it's leaning more into the comedic is John C. Reilly.
John C. Reilly. I mean, not a bad choice.
Yeah, good actor.
Great actor. I went a little younger with my second choice, and I think there's something here, and I think it's a bit of a different energy for Ron Updike, but I think you would still make it work. I was thinking Jesse Plemons.
Oh, old younger, chubbier Matt Damon.
Yes. Just picture him as he's a bit more. Like, I think he's a bit more of a sad sack, but
I like him. He's a good actor, and I think he's really getting into those like somewhat empathetic schlubby roles. I like him. I think he's the pick.
Yeah, let's go with it then. I like it. I think he's more gettable than some of our others as well.
Yeah, it also gets the teens in to watch this movie. You know?
Yeah, he's got that great mustache he can grow. It's gonna be perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Of course, there's Miss Emily Cowles.
Mm-hmm. Again, I have two weird picks.
This is a tough one. I was trying to come up with like older actresses who like fit this role, and so many of our older actresses are like. This is not a slight against them. Good for them. They're all very attractive. Our older actresses, like you're not putting Susan Sarandon in this role. Like they're just too. They're just too like you're too into them. Like whereas she needs to feel a little more. Not that she's not like wonderful, but she needs to feel a little more like your grandma, right? She needs to feel like a little bit more like your grandma. This role, unless you want to. Do you want a sexy Emily?
Well, my first pick is I think just by putting this actress in the role, something interesting is happening, even if it's just off camera, and that person is Tilda Swinton.
Tilda Swinton. So you're going a completely different direction with this. You're just like,
yeah. It's just like you don't know she might be doing her own cases on the side.
She
like,
is probably the monster
weird
of the week in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just thought this role needs more. Tilda Swinton.
Interesting. So you and I went different ways. I actually did try to find a nice grandmotherly person to fill this role.
Oh, okay.
Just because I feel...
Dame Judi Dench, is that who you picked?
No. I feel like one thing, obviously Kolchak never does anything with its side characters, but I realized watching it this week, I'm like, there's something you don't see on TV. Is like, it's amazing that they have a secondary character on this. One of the secondary characters is just like a woman over 70, just like she's come out of retirement to do some work. She's just like, you don't see that character like as a sidekick on TV at all. And I thought it was very interesting.
Uh-huh. So who do you pick?
I went with my first pick, Carol Kane.
Carol Kane? I haven't heard that name in ages.
Well, she was most recently on Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, and she's absolutely wonderful in it. And like, she's a little more manic
that's right.
in that.
Yeah.
But I think she could play a different kind of role in this.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to give you my second one, and it's bombastic. Ready?
Yeah.
All right. Hold on to your wigs and keys. Kathy Bates.
I looked at Kathy Bates as well. I thought that was interesting.
You?
She has so much gravitas. I wasn't sure how she'd fit.
I know. Here's the thing about Kathy Bates. She's great, and she's commanding. Here's my worry. Everyone's just going to watch Emily Cowles. She's going to take... I think she might be... She just might be too big a presence, but I really like Kathy Bates.
Let me pitch you something right now. It's going to really throw a gear in the works here.
Okay.
What's a female version of the name Tony?
Tina? I don't know.
Sure. Tina Vincenzo, played by Kathy Bates.
Oh, okay. You know what? That's not a bad idea. And because right now we have Forrest Whitaker, right?
Yeah.
You think we gender swap it because we need Kathy Bates? I'm all for it if it means Kathy Bates is in our movie.
I was thinking that gravitas of Kathy Bates and like being put upon by Sam Rock, there might be something that seems like some chemistry there to me.
Look, I can call Forrest Whitaker's people and say that contract shouldn't have gone out.
Great. Put a line out. We're changing our minds. Kathy Bates is coming in.
Is it Tina though? Shouldn't it be something better?
And Antonia, is that the Italian version of Anthony?
Yeah, that's a name.
Something like that.
Antonia, like my Antonia, the Willa Cather book.
We find a nice Italian name for her, and she'll be great.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's do it.
All right, I think we should, because when you said it and we were talking about it, I'm like, you know what? I think that is the pick. Anyway, but
that leaves us. Who's your second pick?
My second pick for Emily Cowles is, you're gonna love this one, I think. I'm surprised you didn't come up with it yourself. Linda Hunt.
Oh, done. Perfect.
She's still out there. She's still acting. I think she'd be great.
Oh, it's perfect. Honestly, think of this scene. What's his face? Who's Kolchak?
Sam Rockwell.
Sam Rockwell. I'm sorry, it's my memory. Sam Rockwell shows up. Kathy Bates is there giving him the word. And then in the background is, what's her face?
Linda Hunt.
Linda Hunt. That's great. That's wonderful.
It's fun. I think it's fun. And then Jesse Plemons is there, like trying to write an article about the society.
He's
page.
just there being nebbish. It's wonderful. Honestly, this is one of the best ones we've done. This is great. This is like actual movie.
All right. Who's directing this masterpiece then?
Okay. My pick doesn't work at all anymore because of the people we've cast, I don't think. But I kind of thought it would fit into this sort of, wouldn't it be fun to take 70s tropes and kind of modernize them and at the same time kind of pay homage? So I had picked Quentin Tarantino, which I don't think we've ever picked before. But now I'm like, I don't think this works anymore.
This movie is a lot like his Star Trek movie that lives in his head.
Exactly. Yeah, it's another one that's not going to get made. But so now, at first, when I was picking some people, I thought maybe this would be like a fun, like Jackie Brown-esque sort of caper. But I don't think it works anymore. Who do you have?
I've got two choices. I think based on who we've put together,
Steven Spielberg and George Lucas.
Yeah, those are the two. No, I was trying to think of people who can play in the space, and not horror comedy. I think horror comedy wasn't quite the like directors I wanted for this. I think it needed to be a little more character comedy, but in a like an actual like hard horror space. Like it should be scary as well. Mm-hmm. So I've got two options here. One, Taika Waititi.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I like his stuff. I just don't know if that sense of humor works. But I think it's not a bad pick.
I think it's kind of got that dry New Zealand could work. I think you could find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
Hard to say. And the second pick was Jordan Peele.
Jordan Peele. Can I say something that's an unpopular opinion?
You don't like him?
I think he's so overrated. I
think he's a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's fine. He's perfectly fine. It's just, I don't know.
You're not a fan.
It's not that I'm not a fan. He's just he's got a real good publicist. Anyway,
yeah, that's how Hollywood works.
I know.
I think the movies he's made have been like quite entertaining, and I think that's why he's a good. Like, I think he could make an entertaining movie out of this. Because
let's do it. I'm fine with it.
He would make it funny. Because I think all of his movies have an element of humor to them, but like he also is like he's gonna give you some actual scares. Like he's not gonna like shy away from it's not gonna be all jokes about how a head came off and someone gets squirted in the face with blood.
I know, right? I'm poo-pooing it, but I think he's actually a good pick.
We don't have to go with him either. I'm really fighting for him right now. But
no. You know what? It's better than my pick. Quentin Tarantino's not doing this thing. I think it's also good for 2022. You know, he's a hot young property.
Hot young property. Much, I think, older than us, but a young property.
Well, yeah.
All right, Jordan. You want to hear how this movie shaped out?
Yeah, I really like it.
So the starring cast is Sam Rockwell as Karl Kolchak, Kathy Bates as Vincenzo, Jesse Plemons as Ron Updike, and Linda Hunt as Miss Emily Cowles.
Oh, I mean, Linda Hunt's involved. You can't go wrong.
It's a nice little movie, I feel like.
Can we just say, and what is the monster? What's he going to be doing? Is this going to be a remake of one of the better episodes? Is it going to be its own something new?
It's a good question. I was kicking that around in my head, and I'm just trying to think of like what my favorite monsters were, but I'm not 100% sure. I mean, could go a lot of ways. I don't mind the idea of maybe taking and really revising that one Alien show. I know you weren't a big fan of The Invisible Alien. I don't think you necessarily go that way.
No, you know what? I've come around to that. After we've watched more and more episodes, I think that might be, if not the best episode, one of the top 3.
But I think if you took kind of like, even went as far as going to the like Russian film Stalker and like started really pulling out the extremely weird elements of it, and just making it a little more like insane, that might be interesting. But it might be too much for the first movie. People might not get what it's about.
Yeah. What I kind of thought would work is in some ways pulling a lot of elements and villains from the show, sort of like a Ghostbusters type thing, which is there's some large malevolent force happening, and it starts making things weird. So monsters start appearing or weird things start happening because of this, something underground that's coming up. And so as Kolchak's solving all these cases, he realizes it's all connected to this much larger thing that he has to take down. Right. And I guess eventually opens the sky for sky garbage.
Yeah. We just do Ghostbusters with Kolchak.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's not our problem. That's for the screenwriters to figure out.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, guys, we already got the cast. Just make this work.
Just go ahead. We put it together.
We're already into pre-production. We don't have a script.
Start shooting. It's fine. It's a real multiverse of madness. Will be just fine. Just start shooting.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, pretty good movie.
It is. I actually am pretty happy with that one. So let's get into these episodes then. We've been going long enough. Let's finish this series off.
All right, episode 18, or is it 19? Episode 19.
19. Here's the IMDb summary for episode 19. The Youth Killer. Kolchak discovers a very attractive woman who maintains her youth and beauty by sacrificing young men and women to ancient Greek gods.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this was one of those episodes where I thought it was going to lean into the sort of stereotypical college kind of things you see in movies where there's a lot of, like, hijinks, and that's not what this is.
Not at all. This is very much, this hits a few tropes we've seen in some of these other shows, bad tropes we've seen in some of these other shows.
Yeah,
right off the bat.
I can think of one other thing we watched, which was, I think it's called the Wasp Woman. Was that the one?
That was one.
That where, like, the same idea. There's essentially a woman, and she wants to get younger or appear, or at least keep her age the same, because that's all women want.
Yes. It even starts out where Kolchak's like, it's what man's always wanted, or maybe more accurately, woman, to stay young and sexy forever.
Also, spot on impersonation.
I know, it was my good Kolchak. And it was also in, do you remember Otherworld when they went to the spa island and that woman was...
oh, that's right. Yeah.
It's a trope we've seen many
times. Terrible trope, huh?
Absolutely. This time it's being played by a woman, Kathy Lee Crosby, who played Wonder Woman in 1974.
Mm-hmm.
And
you know what's weird? I went and read a lot more about her. I don't know why. It was late at night, and when I was watching this, and I was like, oh, I think I recognize her. And I don't know if I did. I think she was just a face I've seen in shows from that era. Apparently, was quite the tennis player.
Oh.
And got up to, in the WTA, got up to the rank of number 7 in women's tennis.
No, amazing.
Yeah, it's very good. Anyways, also had a really messy divorce with a football player. So that's neither, that's not what he called for.
In this episode, she plays a woman named Helen Certis, or as we'll find out later, she's actually Helena of Troy.
Yeah, that was a weird turn at the end that adds nothing. There's no reason.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, she's also this person because you recognize that name, viewer. That's it.
Yeah, she's so old. She's Helen of Troy. Anyway, she's been sacrificing beautiful young people to the Greek god Hecate for like, I don't know, a millennium plus, I guess.
Yeah, so there's a couple funny things about that. The first thing is that if you're taking this as they present it, she's been doing this, you're right, for like 1,000 years. And only now is it becoming a problem. For one, that's one funny thing. The second thing is that, so obviously she's a beautiful young actress. She's probably about 30, let's say, early 30s, this actress. And so to make her look old, they add the slightest bit of bags under her eyes because you still want her to be attractive. But they want to show that she's aged. But what's funny is, over the course of the episode, she is essentially sucking the youth out of people to keep her youthful appearance. But it seems to be weighted incorrectly because at worst she looks like maybe 35, and then after she sucks the life out, she's like 30. But these people are like all about in their 20s, but they end up being like
80 years from them.
Yeah. She takes like 70, 80 years from them to like get a couple years back. And I was like, this is unfair.
It's not a great the exponentialness of it is bad.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if she just stole a year here or there from people, no one would notice. But she has to suck like 70 years out of them.
That was the other trope I quite enjoyed too, is like to show you she's old and unattractive, they like put some bags and wrinkles under her eyes. I'm like, okay, cool.
Oh yeah, she's hideous now.
I mean, the other trope they really use in this episode, which is fun, is when she's stealing the youth out of the young people, all of the young actresses or actors and actresses will age very quickly through cuts, and it's just like only one time do they hire an old man to play the old version. The rest of the time they just cake makeup on top of young people.
Yeah, it was a weird choice, right? Because what the first guy that we're going to see that starts this off, it's a guy running, and he's young, he's in shape, he's handsome, and then as he's running, we see this woman, what's her name in the show?
Helen.
So she's off to the corner, sort of like
doing
in
her
the
ritual.
park, like watching. Yeah, she's doing a ritual, watching him, and we see him age rapidly as he's running. And obviously, he doesn't really notice he's getting older. He just starts feeling not great, and the transition's not bad from the makeup as he gets older. And then yes, they cast an older actor to do him at the end, but it is weird they don't do that later on, because I was like, oh, that actually worked. Like, I thought that was a pretty good transition, and it looked much better than when they just throw on like 40 pounds of makeup on someone.
Yeah, even in this, like the young actor, they like whiten his hair and they make him look like, put some wrinkles on his face, and they're quick cuts as he's jogging, so you don't really get too long to look at them. But it's very funny just watching a young person get made old. And then yes, he collapses of a heart attack during his jog, and that's how she steals his power. And then like almost immediately afterward, we actually get to watch a young woman doing aerobics on the balcony of her apartment. And this effect was also pretty good. Was like every time she bends down to like do a stretch and she comes back into frame, they do a cut, and she's slightly older every time she comes back up, until she finally is such an old crone when she sees her own face, she screams and falls off the balcony.
I love that, because it was too far to go, because she freaks out, but like there's still maybe 2-3 feet behind her, so she has to really go backwards to flip over the balcony.
The actors
and
really
I
need
like
to get
that.
some speed to do that flip too.
Yeah. That's right. But anyways, so what we get is, as per normal with Kolchak, it's not enough to have one murder. There's got to be to right away, so they know there's a pattern.
Yeah, something for Karl to put together. I like this one because for the first time ever, he's like on a different story. Or not first time ever, but like it's nice that he has a story to start off. But the story he's been assigned is so funny that brings him into this. Is he's been assigned to write a piece on modern dating, and I was just like, why on earth would you? He's like conservatively 55 years old.
I know. It's like, how small is this newspaper? This is the guy you got in this story. But anyways, it works out well for them because there's something sketchy happening.
Yeah, and we learned it very early. This is what he's supposed to be writing about. But Karl's kind of hanging out with Miss Emily and Ron Updike, and they're all talking about this 90-year-old jogger who was found dead in the park of a heart attack. Kind of just what they're talking about, what a tragedy is. And Karl's like, it's so odd too, because like nobody's come to claim the body, and like there seems to be no paperwork about a 90-year-old man. He's just like, it's so weird that a man healthy enough to go for a jog would like barely seem to exist.
Yeah, and there's something, I don't know if there's a better episode here, but I think there's something interesting that the writers aren't as interested here, which is the idea that no one really seems to care about these older people that have died. And obviously it's because their records don't really match up because there was a young person and now they're older. But I think there's something interesting there about the idea of who is important and who's not, but that's maybe too complicated a concept.
They tease it, like the writer clearly was like, this would be cool, but we're not going to quite do it. Because like even in this thing when Karl's like talking about this with Vincenzo's just like, just focus on your dating story. Nobody cares about 90-year-old people. Like
exactly.
It doesn't make news. And it's a great cut because it turns around and Miss Emily's like been at the door the whole time and she looks so sad, and like Vincenzo's like, oh fuck, what did I do? And like it's a nice scene, but you're right, it never amounts to any more than that scene.
Yeah, because I just think there's something societal that could have been touched on, which when this show is really hitting on all cylinders, that does come into it. But this is sort of one of those weird, it's a weird monster of the week because it's just this lady succubus, which I guess is like the second time we've had this.
Yeah, I guess it's very similar in that way. Anyway, Kolchak decides to start doing his dating coverage, I guess, and he goes to visit a matchmaker under false pretenses for some reason to start the story. Like, I understand when he goes to people and like lies to them why he's there because he doesn't want to tell them he's there investigating a supernatural monster, but he literally is like writing a story on dating, goes to talk to a matchmaker, but he like lies to her and says he's there to get match made, and then when he shows up he's like, just kidding, I'm actually a reporter. Like, she would have talked to you.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. There's this weird idea that no one would ever speak to a reporter, but it's like, let's say he talked to this matchmaking lady and she's like, I don't want to talk to you. He's like, all right, I'll just call the next matchmaking company. Like, one of them would talk to her.
It was the first reveal that Kolchak's only strategy for everything is to ambush everybody, even if the story is just like, hey, tell me about baking today. He like goes to a bakery and just like ambushes them. At any rate, this woman does finally like start talking to Kolchak about the dating scene and sort of talks about her competitors as a matchmaker. She's talking about like singles bars and singles apartments and computer matchmaking that's happening now, specifically a company called Max Match, which is going to be important to us this episode.
Yeah, Max Match. I like the logo for it. It was all like it looked like something you would have like it's advertising like cool new makeup.
But that is all we really get of the matchmaker, is like she kind of just gives Kolchak some other places to go learn about dating. But I do like, there's a thing they don't do anything with, which I was just like, another wasted opportunity in Kolchak, is she's like, even though she finds out he's a reporter, she's like insistent. She's like, all right, I'm going to find you a match to prove you how good a matchmaker I am. And like, at some point she'll call him and she's found a young nurse who might be a good match for him. And Kolchak just doesn't want to deal with it. And I was like, what a waste. Like, it sets up this idea that at some point Kolchak's going to get matched with somebody and have to go on a date or something, where we're going to get a scene and that's going to tie into the episode. It just never goes anywhere.
I thought the exact same thing. I thought, what a missed opportunity of a couple things. One, expanding the personality of Karl a little bit, because it's not 100%, but for the most part through these 20 episodes, he's a pretty asexual character. There's never a romantic plot line or there's never any real indication of his sexuality.
The only thing we know is he hates women.
Right. Which I'm going to not defend that, but I think that was a particular writer's just kind of like jamming in one of these scenes, which is a bit of a sign of the times, because I don't think overall that's his character. That was sort of like outlier episodes that they're just like, oh, this is a bad scene. And I think you can kind of wave that away.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more to do with the time it's being written than anything else.
So anyways, the point being, I think there was something there where you could have expanded his character a little bit and maybe seen like, why doesn't he have a partner? Or maybe it's, whether it's his personal choice or he's, a little bit difficult to deal with, or he's had a bad breakup or whoever it is. I think there's something to expand him a little bit. And then on more fun in terms of this episode, how great would it be if he has to solve a case and the woman he's on a date with won't let the date end, so she just goes with him all the time? And I was like, that's fun. And again, it's like, I'm telling you, this show is screaming for team ups, and they just don't want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. What Karl does do, though, is having heard about singles apartments from this woman, he goes into a singles apartment to check it out. Again, uninvited. He just goes to the gate and he realizes it's locked. Like, he does no preparation.
Yeah.
But as he arrives, so do the cops, because they're investigating an elderly woman who's fallen off a balcony. The woman we saw earlier has died at this complex, and Karl pegs along.
I got a weird question for you. So we go back to this apartment a few times, at least 2 or 3 times, because again, as we mentioned, there's a confusion because they're looking for this older woman. They can't figure out why she was in the building and where she fell off, so they're going through all the apartments, and they have one apartment where obviously the younger version of herself lived, and they're like, this looks weird because the door's open, the music's on, and all this sort of stuff, and it seems like she's disappeared. And there's this dude who keeps showing up, and I'm assuming it's the landlord.
Yes.
And he keeps trying to make excuses for it, but he seems way too involved for a landlord. Like, he's just like, he, for whatever reason, is like obfuscating. He's like, it's not a big deal. And then she goes out. Do you not know how young people are? And I was like, why is this landlord giving all his opinion all the time?
Yeah, I don't know. They needed someone to give exposition, and like they're really trying to like imply it's like, oh, everyone's just all these young people just go to live in singles apartments and they all have sex with each other. Can you believe this degeneracy?
I know, it was just weird, and I was like, is that what they're trying to tell us? Is this like just an old person writing this episode who's just like, kids, am I right?
Yeah, they assigned the Kolchak equivalent to write the dating episode.
Oh, and I should mention, I can't remember the actress's name, but the lady who is running the dating,
Helen.
No, not her. The one who's trying to set Kolchak up.
Oh,
that's a character actress. If you saw her, she's been in a million things. Like, she was acting since like the 40s all the way through, I think, the late 90s. Anyways, she's just she's got one of those faces, and you're like, oh, I've seen her before.
Very funny.
Yeah.
There's also not an important character in this episode, but as always, they introduce a new police lieutenant to like butt heads with Kolchak.
Orkin.
And they try to play with formula for a second here, because like he shows up and he's like, oh, I've heard of you, Kolchak, but I prefer to form my own opinions. Everyone at the station says you're a troublemaker, but I like to work with the press, so let's like kind of get along. And then like a scene or two later, Kolchak goes to visit him, and he's just like, they call me a pinwheel now around the department because I talked to you and was nice to you. Now everyone hates me, so I hate you now too, Karl.
Yeah, it was weird because I thought it was going to be, again, like you said, a kind of against type, because we've had that a couple times, like the one cop who was in anger management, so he was being nicer, and we've had, I think there was the other one cop who had just moved up and he was trying to do things a little differently. We've had a few of them, but yeah, they had just abandoned it after one scene.
Yeah, this cop is set up as like it's gonna be something, and he's gonna like be betrayed by Kolchak and learn a lesson or something about how Kolchak's a bad cop. But it just like he just like goes back to the office, and everyone at the office is mean to him for talking to Kolchak. So he's like, "No, I'm not nice to you either, Kolchak."
We mentioned this previously, and I think even at the beginning of this episode, of sort of like the well-trod paths that this show seems to have. They just keep going over the same sort of stuff, and the idea of like a detective or a sergeant or a lieutenant is fine, but it's like you have a whole police department. There's so many different ways that Karl could get information. He doesn't necessarily have to bump heads with the lead investigator. Like, and I just thought, like, is it just too much effort? But like, there's just so many other ways he could go about things, and they just were like, no, he's got to butt heads with this cop because that's what this show is. It's the 1970s, and people don't trust cops.
I mean, it's why it's ending, right? Because it's so paint by numbers. Like, we just see the same variations every single time. Barely variations.
Yeah.
At any rate, a big surprise for me was Karl goes to visit the city morgue. And
I know, Gordy the Ghoul.
Episode 19, Gordy the Ghoul returns. I was shocked to see it.
Yeah, and but of course you know how it's gonna go. Karl wants information, he wants money, and there's like a whole thing about like, is it him giving money for a TV or buying a TV? They have like a whole negotiation of he gets a TV for getting information.
It's the one thing I kind of liked where I felt like they were almost retconning why they've had so many morticians. But Gordy is kind of like, hey, Karl, me and the other morticians who work here have been talking about how you haven't been paying your debts. Like, you say you're going to pay us for something, sometimes you don't get around to it. So we've all agreed that before we give you any more information, you're going to buy us a color TV. And Karl like negotiates them down to an 18-inch black and white TV for the morgue.
Yeah, not great, to be fair.
But it was an interesting weirdness to be like, oh, so all these morgue attendants know Karl, and we're trying to like there's a shared universe of morgue attendants down there.
Right. Yeah. But the whole point is he wants the information. Is it specifically he's looking for, is it the ring he's looking for?
Well, he's come to see the old jogger who died and wants to like kind of like get a sense of what happened. He's just still kind of curious about it. And when he looks at the body, and I don't know how you would ever notice, but he looks at the old dead body and he's like, looks like it was that this man was wearing a ring at one point. And I'm just like, how?
Right.
Like, unless he was wearing that ring for years, you would not notice a ring mark on his finger. But sure, okay. Which
and this is where we find out the guy had one eye?
Yes, which this is when Karl's like, well, let me see his possessions to see if the ring's in there. And he's like going through a box of possessions. He's like, oh, what's this? And Gordy's like, I had one eye. He had a weird glass eye. Isn't that crazy? But there's no ring inside of the box. But there is a key to an apartment. So Karl like pockets that when Gordy's not looking.
Yeah, and this is the first instance we get. You, as a viewer, you should track this, that the guy had one eyeball.
Yes, it becomes partly important for identifying him and then important for another reason.
And also, I think it doesn't pay off, but regardless.
And then Karl also is just like, well, I didn't find the ring there, so he just goes back to where they found the 90-year-old dead body, and he just digs around in the grass until he finds the ring that fell off the man's finger. It's so weird. In the opening, you see a ring fall on the ground. I assumed it was Helen dropping her ring, but I guess we were supposed to know that it slipped off the old man's finger as he died.
Yeah, it's just because it's filmed and edited in a way where it's confusing because you just see a ring for some reason. I knew it was the guy's, but it doesn't make sense why he just fell off his finger. The whole point is so Karl can get the ring, and Karl puts on the ring for some reason.
Well, he almost gets caught by a cop, so he slides on his finger like it's his own.
Yeah, and anyways, there's a kind of weird running gag that he can't get the ring off his finger.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought it was going to be like a setup to be like he's in danger, but he's never really in danger from wearing the ring.
No, and I think right now we get like an extended sequence of this guy who wants to go by the name Lance. He's changed the name Lance, so he's having a conversation with Helen, and yeah, we see how like the dating company works. Like she's asking him questions about himself, and he seems to meet all their criteria, and one of those criteria are like no visible imperfections like scars or I guess I don't know, like anything that might be abnormal. They want to make sure that that's not the case for this dating app, and they sort of write that off as it's so exclusive that you don't have to worry about someone who might have some visible scar. Like that's a real turnoff. Well,
he's actually being invited within Max Match, if you will. There's an Olympian tier where I think this is what you're talking about.
That's
anyone
right.
who's a perfect specimen, like just the most beautiful people on earth, get to be in this Olympian tier and only date each other. Like
she's really giving a real nod too with the Olympian tier.
What's that?
She gives a real nod to what's happening here with her naming conventions.
It's true. And once you're in the Olympian tier, like Lance is, you get a special ring you can wear to show everyone you're in the Olympian tier, and a little scroll that invites you into the Olympian tier.
It's like you're an engineer. With their little rings they give each other, you know?
Very important rings. They do look like engineering rings, actually, the ones they're wearing in the show.
Yeah. But hey, there's something I like about this guy though. This guy who eventually he says he's changed his name Lance, and she's like, "Ooh, good choice." Which I'm like, "No, it's not." But anyways, we get like a sequence of him then like at home, like getting ready for his date, and his mother's like, "What are you doing? Why are you going on a date?" And he's like, "Leave me alone, Ma." And he's like, "Call me Lance." And he's dressed in like your classic tennis outfit. Which, by the way, tennis was huge in the 70s because it's in every show from the 70s we watch. There's either a tennis episode or a tennis theme of some sort. But anyways, he's like this is what people wear to a tennis date. But then when we see him on his date later, it's clearly the middle of the night.
I also noticed
when he's
that.
going to his date, and I was like, where's he playing tennis? He's playing tennis at midnight?
I also noticed that his date was in the middle of the night for tennis. I was like, okay. I liked his mom also hates computer dating. She's like, what is this, computer dating? That's never going to work.
Yeah. She wasn't great at looking into the future.
But as he walks to his tennis date, he, of course, becomes an old man and dies of a heart attack.
Yeah, and we see Helen there sucking the life out of him again.
Anyway, Kolchak has meanwhile been trying to track down the origins of this apartment key he found, which I think we're led to believe he has just walked into a number of apartments randomly trying doors with the key until he finds the right one.
That's exactly what they imply.
A lot of wasted time there for Karl.
Yeah, because it's like literally the whole building he's been trying.
Yeah. Anyway, he finally finds the door that opens, goes inside to this man's apartment. The old man's key leads to this apartment, but inside he finds a young man's apartment. He finds the Olympian scroll that ties it to the ring, and he learns about Mac's match. And then he also finds a medical note in the man's wallet saying this young man only has one eye and has a glass eye. And so Karl's able to like, oh, well, the old man and the young man both have glass eyes. Maybe they're related, you know, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Karl then is pretty convinced this has something to do with Mac's match. Like, he saw a ring on the body of the woman who fell off the balcony as well. So he's just like, you know, rings, they're both dating services. So he goes to check out Mac's match, and no one there will serve him. There's a lot of young people filling out forms for the computer matching service, but none of the employees there will serve Karl because he's just too old.
Yeah, but he's able to talk his way into speaking to Helen directly.
Well, he makes a big stink until Helen has to intervene.
Yeah, and then while he's talking with her, he sort of flashes his ring that he has. I think it's mostly to try to get a reaction from her.
And she kind of changes her tune. At first she's like, oh, well, sir, you're not really our clientele. But she sees the ring and she changes her tone. She's like, well, actually, we can't help you here because you're just too masculine. Like, we can't do anything for you. You're already perfect.
Yeah. But clearly she's just like, there's nothing I want to suck out of you.
And Karl's really trying to like instigate something. Like, he's like, oh, well, I'm a writer. And it's so funny. I happen to have written a story one time about young people get turned into old crones. He's really trying to get a rise out of her in some way. And she really doesn't go for it. She kind of just like shows him the door. But Karl's like on to the idea something's happening at Mac's match because he returns that night for what he calls, as journalists call it, a quote, midnight interview, which is just breaking and entering.
You say that all the time, don't you?
Yeah. That's when I come to your house in the middle of the night, smash a window and poke around. It's my midnight interview.
You've offered me to join you many times for a midnight interview.
Yeah. How are you supposed to know if a candidate is a good candidate if you don't give a midnight interview?
Yeah, but what I like is that he goes into this place, and he sees her doing the ceremony, which I don't know if we mentioned. It opens with her doing a ceremony, which is mostly her speaking in what we're going to find is ancient Greek, over like a pyre of some sort. And he sees her doing it. And then there's another thing we've seen Kolchak do a million times is he's like, you know what this is a good time to do? Take a photo with my very noisy camera.
It always works. It never gets him caught.
Yeah, and then if she hears it and he has to run and hide behind a couch.
Well, why don't you describe, because it's very funny. She has the sealed off room that she tells everyone's the computer room in this business. Yeah. But this room is insane.
It's like a coliseum. It's like a big round room that has what I guess would be like Greek sculptures, like pillars and statues, and then in the middle of the room is again this sort of like pillar with fire on the top, and that's where she does her ceremony. And then above her is a big skylight so she can see the moon, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. It's very funny. Yeah, Karl almost gets caught. He escapes, but she's able to complete the ritual she's doing, and we get a cutaway to a woman who is thinking about going on a date that night, but she's a teacher, so she had a nap instead, and while she has a nap, she gets old and dies.
I think of all the episodes we've seen, this is the saddest death we've seen.
You just lay down for a nap. You don't wake up again.
Well, it's the second person, by the way, we've seen in the show die from taking a nap. But this person just goes to sleep and then ages rapidly and then just never wakes up.
It was a very insane, like, I'm like, whoa. And it's very funny. They introduce her. I believe her monologue is like, her children would never see her again. And I was like, are you telling me she's a single mother as well? And then later she's like, they say she's a teacher. I'm like, oh my God, thank God. Anyway, Karl's now like, he's on to what's going on. Something to do with Greeks, something to do with young people getting their youth sucked away so someone can stay young. So he goes to talk to his source on all things Greek, a former professor turned cabbie.
This was odd because I had to rewind it because I didn't hear the part that he used to be a professor. I was like, are they literally saying the only expert they can find is a Greek cab driver? But then I don't know if that's worse. Why did he used to be a professor? What is happening? Why did they not just have him be a professor?
Did you not catch him talking about being a professor in the past and how he misses all the young bodies that were around him?
That's right.
Oh, so you were fired for assaulting your students. You're
right. Sorry. They had the throwaway line that he's like, I couldn't be he says, I couldn't be a professor anymore because of all the young women. And it was just such a throwaway line of like,
too. It's like a joke for
no big deal.
It's like, this is funny, right, everybody?
Yeah, it was so odd. It's one of those real timestamps. But then to like really punctuate this, while he's having the conversation with this guy, another drunk guy who's like a businessman on a business trip keeps trying to get in the cab and then makes just like weird jokes because he's drunk in the morning. That's like, but it doesn't mean anything. That's one of these weird things in the show is sometimes it's hard to know what you should track or not. Like you're like, oh, a guy in an eyeball, is that important? And you're like, but this drunk guy who's talking about his convention, is that important? And it's like, well, one of them is.
Yeah, it's a very odd sequence. I mean, really, the drunk guy is just a side comedy character, just like a really gross guy there to party, I guess. I don't know.
He's the one who says he was with a real, what did he say? He was with a real dog the night before. What did he say? A real bow wow. He's the one who did that line.
Right. Your favorite line.
Well, it was just such a, well, here's the thing. Like, I know it's played for laughs and it's written by probably an older guy, but the joke doesn't land because he's a gross old guy.
Yeah,
so
I know.
Like, you criticize
everything
him?
About him is awful.
Yeah. He's like, I was with real Uggo last night. I'm like, do you have a mirror, my friend?
At any rate, Karl shows the cabbie a picture of Helen, the owner of Max Match. And the cabbie immediately is like, oh, great photo of Helen of Troy. I'm like, I'm sorry, you think this woman is Helen of Troy based on the photo of a real human being you're looking at?
Yeah, he basically is like, he's like, I've seen a million photos of her, which, by the way, I don't think there is a million photos. I'm sure there's artist interpretations, but it's not like there's any consistency to that. It's just such a weird thing to say. But anyways, it's the only way they can tie it to what they want, which is this. It's not even Greek mythology. It's just this idea that it's Helen of Troy that for some reason wants to say young forever, and she's been doing this for 1,000 years. I don't know why. So it doesn't really work. Yeah,
so the cabbie explains, he's just like, Helen of Troy had made a deal with Hetica, I'm mispronouncing that terribly, for eternal youth.
One of the gods.
And to do so, she would have to be making sacrifices to the Greek god, and probably Greek sacrifices used a lot of ornamentation, i.e. rings, so that's probably what the rings mean. Like, he's explaining all this to Karl, and he kind of goes in, he's like, and you got to give the right sacrifice, because if you give a subpar sacrifice, you'll get punished by the gods, and that's, now we're like, oh, glass eye.
Yeah, so this is when I think Kolchak, into episode 19, doesn't work as well. When they have spent all this time of Karl investigating something that the viewer already knows. We're waiting for him to catch up to us. And instead of having the clues sort of add up to a conclusion for him, they kind of run out of time. And at the very end, you have to have a character who just gives all this exposition. And it's like, well, we could have just had more of that information be peppered through the episode, and this is when I don't think it works as well, when you have to do these sorts of scenes where you're like, yeah, there's a Greek professor who's now a cab driver and he just gives all the information. It's like, okay,
but it's all worth it for that Greek cabbie, Jordan, because they're like, we got to get that ring off your finger, hard cut. They're just, the Greek cab driver has a handful of mayonnaise and he slaps it on Karl's hand. They start rubbing mayonnaise all over Karl's hand in an extreme close-up of mayonnaise action.
Yeah, it's gross. And the gag is that it's the best way to like lubricate so that you can get the ring off. And it doesn't really pay off for much other than like Vincenzo's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I got mayonnaise. And then we don't even really need to talk about, there's a side plot that Vincenzo's trying to lose weight and he's doing yoga now.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. Vincenzo's trying to get healthy and he's doing yoga. Like, that's the whole joke.
The joke is like, yoga, isn't that funny?
At any rate, Karl can't get the ring off. It's stuck on there. So he's like, I really need to do something about this. And the cabbie just like says randomly, he's just like, oh, in the olden days, they would the priests would just destroy the like heretical temples or whatever. And Karl's like, all right, that's what I'll do. And he runs at the door. And the cabbie's like, yeah, I didn't say it did anything. And we're like, what?
Yeah. It's supposed to add this extra beat of Karl's going to now do something that's going to be ineffective, but I don't know what that adds to the episode. Because again, we have maybe 5 minutes left.
Yeah, it doesn't add much. Because basically Karl breaks back into Mac's match again. He just runs right into that Greek room and just starts smashing the Roman columns and everything. He just starts smashing them all. And Helen of Troy just stands there watching him completely unfazed. And she's just like, I don't know what you thought that was going to do. And she's like, well, I guess you're wearing that ring, so the gods are going to kill you now anyway. And I'm like, what? I don't understand what's happening. And anyway, so lightning starts striking, like wind starts blowing. It starts getting like, oh no, something's happening. And then Karl's like, oh, FYI, did you know that sacrifice you made literally 4 sacrifices ago was slightly imperfect? So maybe you're in trouble. And then she turns into a stone statue.
It was weird, right? Because the idea is that if you don't do, they did seed it, to be fair, which is she only wants like quote unquote perfect specimens.
Yes.
And so because she made a sacrifice that she unintentionally did that was not perfect, a la this guy with one eye, the gods are then angry. But it doesn't work because they didn't lean into it. And then, as you're saying, it was like the first or second murder.
He's the first murderer of 4 murders.
So it's like, why didn't they just do that at the end? Why didn't, or it could have even been a thing with Karl did where he like very cruelly sacrificed someone because he knew that was the only way to defeat her. Something like that. There was like, it's just like, oh, this doesn't really work. And it's also like, and she turned into stone. Why?
So the gods were punishing her.
It's just like, it didn't work.
In the course of this episode, Karl did nothing to affect the outcome. This would have happened to her anyway, but for whatever reason, the gods wait for sacrifices to like check I guess it takes them a while to go through the paperwork and see if all the sacrifices have been perfect, I guess.
Yeah, and then he's like at the end, he's like, well, so dating, watch out. You're like, what?
And you know what is crazy? This is all set up like she's making sacrifices of young, beautiful people. They have to be perfect to keep her young. Great. Karl gets the ring stuck on his finger, an imperfect sacrifice. That should have been how he defeated her. As he shows up, he's just like, she's doing a sacrifice. Right, yeah. He's like, you can't sacrifice me. I'm not a good choice. And she's like, oh no, I didn't know you had a ring on. Uh-oh. And then like, that's why she's defeated.
You're right. That makes much more sense.
It doesn't make any sense what's happening in this episode.
Yeah, it's not a good episode.
And that's it. He just stands next to a statue and he's just like, well, I beat her. And he's like, you know what, you folks at home, always be careful what you put on your fingers. Like this ring I just got off. Then he puts back on his fingers like, oh, it's stuck again.
Yeah, it's not a strong one.
Here's the IMDb summary for episode 20, The Century.
This is one story I may not get to file in person, so I'll have to talk fast because it's after me. Claustrophobia has long been a part of the human experience from the Cro-Magnon all the way up to Freud. So if you ever happen to find yourself underground, and I mean deep underground, don't linger in the shadows.
Kolchak tries to find some kind of reptilian monster that has been killing construction workers after they open a new tunnel nearly 2 miles underground.
I have many, many questions about this episode. First, I don't think The Century is a good title for this episode.
I understand why it's a crazy title for this episode.
It's a crazy title for what this is, because it should just be The Crocodile, or Crocodile Man, or Lizard Time, or something like that. And I gotta say something else. The lizard doesn't look great. I'm not ruining anything. It's like a bad lizard crocodile monster he's fighting. The costume is bad.
It is a man in a rubber suit, Godzilla, like a very sub-tier Godzilla villain.
Yeah. Now, for most of the episode, they very wisely do it in very, very dark shadows, and you only get glimpses of it, which is, it plays best because how bad the costume is. When you see it in long shots walking and sort of in action scenes, it's very original Star Trek, but even worse.
Yeah, this is real low rent. Honestly, It's bad, but I really liked it. It was very funny to watch. I did too.
I think it's good. It's fun. It's just, it looks bad, especially for modern eyes. And there's something else I'm going to ask you, Luke, and this is taking us off track. The company in this, the main company in this this episode, what are they called?
Marymount Archive Corporation.
Okay. I don't understand what this company does. It's all over the place.
It's a storage unit.
But it's not. They're also a mining company.
No, they're not a mining company.
Aren't they?
No.
Then why are they mining underneath the company?
All right. Well, we'll get into it in a second, I guess. But
okay.
So I'm going to describe the company to the listener. Marymount Archive Corporation is an office tower in Chicago, apparently. But they also have elevators that go quite deep underground. And in these kind of underground, they've kind of built storage units, and they're very like corporate and like, you know, hallways with fluorescent lighting. It all looks like you've seen in like any number of corporations, but there's just no windows. It's just all underground, big long hallways that theoretically go to big storage units, basically, where companies put their data. They're putting, I guess, all these corporate records are going on magnetic tape and being stored down here, so that when so if a nuclear blast happens, they're protected, or like weather or storms, you know, anything.
Right.
Like they're just protected. What Jordan, what you're thinking is, in these tunnels, apparently, they've built this sort of underground complex to store things in, and it's apparently based on an old salt mine. So portions of it are an old salt mine, which just look like old caverns with like old, like kind of like where you see a pickaxe person mining, and the company doesn't use these caverns because there are they say there's hot springs in them, so they're too moist to actually store anything, but they still happen to be connected to the complex of tunnels they've built underneath this complex. So there are both like caverny rocky tunnels and then like weird corporate like hallways.
Okay, I got that, but here's the thing. They literally have scientists testing seismic activity and doing mining down there.
They do not have that scientist down there. They have an agreement with the government, and the government has sent a seismologist underneath there to just do general seismology readings for the government.
Right. So now we've explained all this. That all makes sense. I don't think it was terribly clear in the episode. Also, isn't that needlessly complicated? Why not just have this be a mining company?
It wouldn't be Karl Kolchak if it wasn't needlessly complicated.
It's just like, it's also we can get him into these caverns. It's just like, we didn't need all this. This is too much.
At any rate, it opens with Kolchak, and it's a classic Kolchak trope. It's the end of the episode, and he's describing to you kind of like a teaser for what's to come. He's driving through these tunnels, trying to get away on this golf cart, and he's like, something's chasing me.
And I was actually hoping, and for most of the episode I thought this was going to be the case, that they had changed format a little bit, and that this would have been the middle of the episode, which, I'll be honest, I think would have been better that he was doing this halfway through, but it's not. It's the end of the episode. We kind of get a similar scene twice.
Yeah, so just to tease you that he's going to get chased by something in these crazy underground caverns and like corporate tunnels and things. We cut to a few days earlier, and we're in the sort of salt mine tunnels that we described earlier. They're not the corporate ones, they're salt mine tunnels. This Dr. James Verheiden, he's the government scientist who's there to study seismology, has driven into them in one of the golf carts with an employee of the Marymount Archiving Company. And he's just there, presumably on a scouting mission, just kind of looking around. But what he finds is a big rock that he digs out of the ground, and that rock is full of eggs for some reason. These like black,
it's clearly eggs,
fistful eggs. And Dr. Verheiden, he puts them on the cart and he takes them back to his lab, and he leaves the employee there for reasons unknown. And that employee is immediately killed by the lizard monster, the rubber-suited lizard monster.
Yeah, so now what is very clear to the audience, and should be clear to this doctor, is that, oh, I've moved eggs, and the mother is angry. But it's going to take a while to get there.
I mean, the scientist doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, he just wants those eggs.
And then we cut a day later, second murder, as these Kolchak episodes have started doing. There's always two murders to kick us off. The second murder shows an electrician changing light bulbs in a hallway in this underground complex. And we see a monster's hand smashing the light bulbs down the hallway, and this electrician is then killed by the lizard monster.
More of a claw, but yes. And again, it works well. They sort of write it off that we're going to learn that this lizard creature doesn't like light. So that's why it does it. But really, in terms of the structure of the episode, it's better if it's just done in the dark because it doesn't look as hokey.
Absolutely. A detective is put on the case of these missing, these killed scientists. I guess they don't know they're murdered. They killed people in this complex, and partly because, as we've said, the Marymount complex is an important corporate archive, but also the government stores documents down there. So there's a police detective on it, but she is like supposed to keep it pretty low key. And she's also.
What did you think of this?
Lieutenant Irene Lamont, the first female detective on the force.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really into Kolchak's dislike of women.
Yeah, so this is like, I don't know if it's so much, you could argue with me, I don't think it's so much Kolchak as much as the people writing this show.
Yes,
and what you get is like, oh, it's a woman lieutenant. And you're like, great, but then they really lean into it in the wrong ways. And what it is not that the men have difficulties because she is a authority figure and they don't like listening to a woman, which there's something interesting there about this male-dominated field and these
she had
people
to
that
fight her way up to be the first one, but no, that's not what they're doing.
That's not what they're doing. What they're basically saying is that she is there, earned or not, and what she does is she manipulates men because she's attractive, and she uses that against them to get away with not giving information, and she sort of manipulates the press because they're all kind of doe-eyed and in love with her.
All the reporters want to sleep with her, so they let her do anything she wants.
And Kolchak, of course, being the somewhat asexual character, is not interested in her. He's only interested in the story. That's his real love, is the truth. And so he's combative with her. I don't think he's like we said, I don't think he's on the line of how he's dealing with women. I mean, it's because of a couple past episodes, I think you could make a very good argument that he's anti-women. I don't think it's that as much as he doesn't really care, and I think he's irritated that the other men are acting the way they are.
Yeah, I mean, there's that element to it. I think you're right. I think to put things on the character is hard to do in a show like this because, like, it's so much you can see the voice of the author often giving a tone to this. But I will say that throughout this, obviously Kolchak's annoyed that no one's really sticking it to this police officer because she's a woman and they're all in love with her. So that's a piece of it. But anytime Karl has to describe the only female lieutenant detective on the force, he only refers to her as a Nazi.
Yeah. And he also describes her physically. Like, it's not, I'm not saying it's all copacetic. It's definitely not.
It's such a weird episode for this part of it.
Yeah, and this show is frustrating sometimes, and I'm going to get off track here, but like, I really like the character of Karl Kolchak. I like the idea of it. I like the concept of the show. I've said it before, I like the Monster of the Week, especially when it works well. There's just so many missed opportunities in the show. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And one of them is like this female lieutenant. There's something really fun you could have with him and her, again, not necessarily teaming up, but showing a different aspect to the relationship between the police and the press, and they just don't want to do that. Instead, it's like, can you believe this broad is in charge?
Yeah, I mean, really what it is Kolchak butts heads. She doesn't want to tell him anything. He, like, tricks her into revealing that the autopsy for one of the men is happening that day, so Karl goes to the hospital, does what he usually does. He dresses up in scrubs and somehow is, like, mistaken for a doctor who's supposed to be in the autopsy so that he can learn that the man was clearly killed by reptile teeth.
But we find out later, she drops a line that she knew he was hiding and pretending, but I don't know why she didn't stop it.
That was weird. Like, we definitely see him going to the autopsy, and she sees him in, like, a face mask, and she, like, double takes on him. Like, she's like, I think I recognize this guy. And then she never does anything, so I just assumed that we were supposed to get to be like, oh, she almost caught on, but she didn't. And then later in the episode, she's like, I knew you were there. And I'm just like, but it doesn't add any. It's not like when she's like, I knew you were there, and I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt. Like, that's not even that. She's just like, I knew you were there. I'm like, okay.
That's the thing. They could have added something to her character, and they could have shown that she, in the end, outsmarted Karl. There'd have been something interesting there, like, oh, by the way, I knew you're doing A, B, C, and D, and the reason is because I got this, and I outthought you. And I thought, oh, that's cool, but that's not what they do. It's just like, hey, I knew it was you, but I didn't do anything because of reasons.
Yeah, I also was just like, I clocked it too, and I'm just like, is this going to be a plot twist later? And it's just not. It's just like she later says, I knew you were there. I'm like, okay. Great.
Yeah. So anyways, and it's played for laughs that he obviously doesn't want to be a doctor, but he gets the information he's looking for.
Reptile teeth.
Reptile teeth. That's it. That's what he was looking for. They're basically like, this guy was attacked by a reptile. How's that possible?
So Kolchak decides he's going to pose as a representative of the International Nickel Syndicate from Winnipeg to get a tour of the Marymount Archives as a prospective client. A tour by special guest cameo.
Yeah. It's the character is Jack Flaherty, and it's played by Tom Bosley. What a get.
Happy Days fame, right? That's where he's from.
That's right. Yeah, and Father Dowling Mysteries for some people who like his later work.
Anyway, they head down 10,000 feet into the sort of like storage level. So they take a big elevator ride down. It hurts Karl's ears because they go down too fast.
Yeah. Which, you know what, I kind of like that because they play with it later on. Because later on he's gonna hide himself in a box, so he goes down, and they play it again, and we're just like, my ears.
Yeah, it's cute. I mean, it's some cute sequences. Karl's getting a tour, and of course, Lieutenant Lamont pulls up some cops to talk to the people at the Marymount Archives as well. And she immediately spots Karl's car. She comes in and she talks to the secretary. And this is something. Did you catch this? And is this true? She walks up and she's like, "Hey, I saw that car out front. Was a guy with red hair here?" And I was just like, does Karl have red hair?
I was going to talk to you about this. And I think we haven't mentioned it. Someone who's actually listened to these, God help them, may be able to track this. This is at least the third time where someone has mentioned Karl has red hair. And I think at best, there's maybe like a reddish tint at best. It's sort of like, by the way, people tell me constantly I have red hair. Constantly. I don't have red hair. Just for the record.
I mean,
my hair is at best, dirty blonde.
You look a bit like
Ronald
hair. McDonald.
It's not, but people constantly are like, "Oh, you're a ginger," and I'm like, "I'm not." And it's weird that Karl. They've said it many, many times, and he does not have red hair, guys.
That's funny. This is the first time I've clocked it, so I was like, my hair was blown back. Episode 20, the final episode. It's like he's a red. Anyway, the detective has someone call down to get Tom Bosley on the phone to warn him. It's like, you're giving a tour to a reporter. And when the call comes in, Kolchak kind of uses that moment to like slip away, just like kind of like slides out a door while Tom Bosley takes the call. Also so funny. Yeah. Tom Bosley's like gone for the rest of the episode. He's like in 2 scenes and that's it. That's all they brought him in for.
It's a weird thing they've done many, many times where they have a guest star. And I think it's sort of like, it was good for a commercial for like, hey, on this week's Kolchak, it's Tom Bosley. And you're like, is he going to be in it? Like, not really. And they've done this time and time again with the guest stars where it's like, it's a cameo at best.
They just like, basically they come to the studio that day. They're going to shoot the episode and they're like, they call around and say, hey, who has a lunch break coming up?
Yeah, exactly. Who's got 2 hours? Yeah.
Anyway, Kolchak kind of goes and starts exploring the basement. He meets this angry union man in the lunchroom who's kind of upset about the deaths and not getting hazard pay for working so deep underground. And this guy kind of tells Karl all about the deaths that have happened. One happened in the old salt mines, and the next one was kind of one sector over inside the complex. Mm-hmm. So Karl's kind of piecing together the timeline of the deaths. And then an alarm goes off, and the union man's so annoyed. He's just like, that alarm means we got to search the complex for intruders. That's not even part of my job description.
Yeah. But it's because people like Karl keep getting in.
I mean, it works. I mean, and obviously he doesn't do a good job. He's not even reporting this man who knows. Like, he meets Karl, and Karl's just like, yeah, I'm undercover as an insurance investigator.
Oh, one thing that has nothing to do with this episode, but you'll see in this scene, the guy's sitting at a cafeteria, and he's drinking his coffee, and Karl goes over to the vending machine, and it's a vending machine that pours you coffee. And I don't know, am I wrong? Those don't exist anymore, right? Because I think we just have coffee machines. But I like the idea of the old vending machine that gives you coffee.
Yeah, I think you'd have to really go to I think if you go to a really old wing in a university, you can find an old one that still exists. Because some old professor won't let it leave.
I thought about it recently because I was in the city and there was a fancy coffee shop, and what they had was a robot window on the outside where you just typed it in and out came a cup and all your coffee drink and stuff. And it was very similar, but I think it's just a modern version of this sort of thing.
Yeah, they're a little classier now. They got robot baristas. It's just not a cup. A paper cup falls down and there's hot brown liquid pours in. At any rate, Karl steals a golf cart now, and he kind of goes driving around these hallways looking for these sectors. And it's so funny. He eventually finds the hallway that electrician was killed in, but all the light bulbs are still broken on the ground and it's still dark. And I was just like, nobody ever went down there after he was killed and cleaned anything up. It's been days.
Well, what they did was I don't know if you noticed it, there actually was security tape and emergency tape. So I think what they're implying is they were just that's bad, just tie it off and no one go down to that window, that ward. Yeah.
I guess maybe it's an active crime scene, I suppose.
Perhaps.
Anyway, Karl goes down there and starts looking around, and apparently the lizard man has just been wandering that hallway the entire time because he just appears.
And he has been wandering. And again, it does not look good when it wanders. It looks It looks like someone's bad Halloween costume.
And it's so funny. Like, Karl runs back, jumps in his golf cart, does an Austin Powers level, like, multi-point turn in a tiny hallway.
Yeah.
And then it's so weird. He drives off down a different hallway, and somehow the lizard man is now in front of him in a now different hallway. None of this made sense.
I think it was just supposed to be that it's so cavernous that it knows its way around, and he's accidentally got turned around, I think.
Anyway, so Karl, like, runs his cart in and then jumps out and runs off, and he's, like, runs back into that lunchroom where the police are waiting for him, and he just gets caught, and he's, like, gets his film confiscated, and he's just like, you're under arrest.
This drove me
Karl.
crazy. So this scene, the police, I can't remember her name. Lamont. She's sort of questioning him, and she's like, I want to know what you know, and you're not giving us information. And I'm yelling at the TV being like, you just took his film. His film has the answers that you're looking for, and you don't want to hear it. So I didn't understand, because she's like, I want all the answers. I'm like, you have them. He took pictures of a lizard guy. That's the answer.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird, especially because a little later in the episode, we'll learn that she knows there's a lizard person down there.
I know. Yeah, and they're like, in classic sort of X-Files way, it's the authorities are hushing it so that no one knows about it. I'm like, so why did you need information?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't, the whole point was she was trying to stop him from getting info. It's dumb.
I mean, maybe if she learned it later, it was just like, whatever's going on her journey, we're not privy to, so none of it adds up.
Yeah.
At any rate, Karl's arrested again. We cut to INS. Vincenzo's bailing out Kolchak as per usual. And so Karl's like, I got to get back in there. I'm going to call up my old contact who just got released on parole from prison.
I want to make a real quick note, though, before we get to this guy, because that's an actual thing. They do another scene where Karl gets angry at someone. In this case, it's Vincenzo, because he implies that Vincenzo is being nice to the police officer because, again, he's attracted to the woman.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is the running. The running thing is like, for some reason, people let her get away with things because she's pretty.
Yeah.
So dumb.
Anyways, it doesn't mean much other than, like, women.
It just lets Kolchak rail against the woman for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but you're right. The important part of the scene is that he has an informant who used to be in prison, who I think they imply was part of the mob or like
some sort of smuggler or something.
Yeah. So, anyways, he gets info for the guy, goes to him, and I don't know why though. They have to have a scene where he gets more information on like crocodiles or alligators, and so he's talking to this guy about it as if this guy could provide any information, but they just want that scene where you would normally have him, I guess, go to a museum or something, and he'd see like a picture on the wall of a crocodile. In this case, they're just like, oh, while he's with this smuggler, the smuggler will tell alligator jokes and give kind of information on alligators or crocodiles.
Yeah, he's like, Kolchak is reading a book on crocodiles. It's like, do crocodiles stand on their back legs? And this guy's like, I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, and it doesn't amount to anything. Really, what you get in this scene is that they supply, I guess it's machinery and tools for mining and to this company, and they put Karl into the box so he can go down. Is that not what it is?
I mean, it is what it is, but they don't supply anything. He's gone to this guy because he's good at smuggling. He used to smuggle parrots in coffins or something. Kolchak has literally gone there, so this man will put him in a giant, oversized box, deliver that box to the Marymount Archives Corporation, and then the corporation just takes this randomly delivered box and just brings it back underground.
Okay, so I didn't think it was that. That's dumber. I thought it was that he happened to know someone by coincidence that also worked as a supplier for this company, so it was all sort of above the level in terms of how they thought.
Oh, maybe. I didn't catch it if that was the case.
It may not have been.
What I got was he told a story about how he got in trouble for smuggling parrots but didn't soundproof the box, and now he's going to smuggle Karl into this place in a box.
Yeah, but the whole point is it's a creative way to get Karl back in because he's been caught several times, and I think it works pretty well, and it's that fun thing where he's in a box. But you know what I like about Karl when he's in the box? So he's getting transported down, and of course we joke that his ears are popping again. But he has a flashlight, and while he's getting all jarred around, he's still trying to read about crocodiles with his flashlight while it's happening, and he keeps being like irritated that he's getting disturbed. But I thought that was kind of funny.
I mean, Darren McGavin does great work. Watching him in a box was great.
There's a couple things that he does as an actor that are so fun, and one's coming up where he just ad-libs things, but like his actions. So when he gets out of the box, I don't know if you noticed, he starts closing the box behind him, but gets his finger caught in it accidentally, and then he's like, and he like just shakes his hand, and I thought, what a great little scene. There's no way that was scripted. And he does little things like that, like adjustments of his clothes, and like he'll bump something and fix it. And he does this all the time, and it really adds to the character. And I think he does. It's why it's so hard to have anyone else be Kolchak, because he is that character.
Yeah, I did catch that too. He breathes so much life into it just to like get out of the box. Then he's like, oh, I should close the box so no one notices. And then he gets his fingers caught. And I'm like, for sure this was just him on the scene being like, I'm going to get my fingers caught. It's going to be really funny.
Yeah, it's great. And there's so much of that through the show we probably didn't mention, but it's great to see that character be so three-dimensional.
Yeah, and anyway, he's back in the caverns. They got him back down there into the complex, and he stumbles into Dr. Verheiden's office and finds the broken remains of like an egg. Like one of the eggs is cracked open. They're sitting on his like workbench or whatever. And Dr. Verheiden re-enters the office, and he's not happy to find Kolchak there and doesn't want to answer his questions, because we learned this a little bit earlier. Another character kind of informed us of this, but Verheiden is a very paranoid from the time when he was a professor in Utah, and he found a new mineral or something while he was a professor there. He'd gathered it all up, put it in boxes, and then put it on a train to ship back to the university. And one of his colleagues erased his name off the boxes, then wrote his own name on it, and somehow he lost all credit for discovering these minerals.
Yeah, it's just the thing this show does, where they give way more backstory than necessary to sort of, I guess, color things. But it's like, okay, does this matter?
It's just to explain why he won't tell Karl, and like he won't tell Karl what the eggs are or what he found. Like he basically just won't tell Karl anything, and Karl's just like, I don't know. But
that's the thing. It's not needed, because you could just have him going, I don't know who you are. I'm not giving you information. That's all you need. But they have to like, well, there's a reason he's paranoid, because otherwise he clearly would tell a reporter he doesn't know information.
Yeah. And then like you think that's going to be important that they've kept this character around, but then Lizard Man busts through a wall Kool-Aid Man style and murders him immediately.
It looks terrible. It's like they've pre-cut the wall in like a jagged thing. It just looks so bad.
It's so funny. Oh, there is a great clip that I'm probably going to put on Instagram during that whole thing. He's trashing the entire like science guy's table, and there's like this quick clip where they cut to the Lizard Man, and he just flips a table. It's so funny to me.
Have you ever flipped a table in anger?
Never. Would love to.
Me neither.
Karl kind of escapes. He's like, oh no, the scientist is killed. I got to run out of this room. As Karl runs out of this room, he runs into a colonel and a bunch of soldiers with automatic rifles pointed at the door, but they're also posing as water department employees.
Yeah, so there's like they're like shooting guns off, and Karl gets knocked down, and the alligator, I keep calling him, whatever you call this thing, this lizard monster.
It's immune to bullets.
Yeah, it knocks people over and gets away, and then Karl goes and looks at their dog tag, I guess, and is like, oh, they're really military guys. I was like, yeah, well, the water inspectors wouldn't have automatic guns. I think that answered it, already.
It's very weird, because we didn't mention it, but like they pop up a little early in the episode when Karl's getting escorted out. They're like, these watermen are there, and they're like, oh, we're here to take over the case. And I'm like, what is this? And then later you're like, oh, they're undercover military guys because they're there to help cover up the lizard. It's all so random.
Yeah. And overly complicated. There's no reason for it. It doesn't add anything.
Yeah. Anyway, they haul him back to the lunchroom. They start interrogating Kolchak, just like they did earlier. It's the same thing. They pull it. They're destroying his film. They're like, what do you know? Mm-hmm. And then the lizard man like smashes through another wall and like knocks out a breaker. So the lights go out and Karl like escapes.
Yeah, he suddenly Batman's out.
And it's such a weird sequence of events, because then Karl, basically, we catch up to Karl. He finds a different storage room that the doctor was using, and inside of that he finds the big rock that's full of the little eggs, like the little fist-sized lizard eggs. And he's like, oh, eggs. And he like takes one out and looks at it, and we're like, okay, first time we get to see an egg. And I'm like, okay. And he puts the egg down on a counter, makes a torch out of a stick, then takes all the rest of the eggs inside of the rock and puts them in a golf cart and drives off with them. But he's left one egg behind on a table. And I was just like, oh, is there what like I thought there was going to be like a cliffhanger. I didn't know why he left one of those eggs behind, but they never come back to it.
I didn't realize he left one behind.
Maybe I'm wrong. Like he took one out and was really looking at it, and then he puts it on the table and goes this scene goes on forever. He like builds a torch, and then he goes and gets all the rest of the eggs, and he puts them all individually on a go-kart.
Only somewhat on that point. You mentioned the scene takes forever, and you're right. This is the episode that I would mention at the very beginning of this recording. That there's so much. It clearly was short because there's several scenes that are just extended way past you would normally have them. You're just like, why is this still going on? It's like, oh, I think it was short. They just kept it running.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably not too off the mark. But yeah, the point is, Karl finds the eggs. He kind of was like, oh, let me take these eggs back to this salt. Like, this is where we catch up with him at the beginning, where he's driving through the corridor trying to get away from the monster. He's driving back to these salt mines where they originally found the eggs, I guess. And he's using the eggs to lure the monster back to him, and he's using the torch to keep the monster at bay.
Yeah, he sort of makes a torch out of some materials he finds, and then he's driving around. The monster comes, and when it comes to like attack him, he sort of pokes it with the fire. It doesn't exactly work because he still gets knocked down, but thankfully for him, it just picks up the eggs and hilariously just carries them away, and it just looks so silly because of the costume.
Yeah, I mean, the idea being it's just like he gave it back its eggs, and now it's over.
Yeah, so it's not going to kill people. They're still mining in that area, but I guess if they just leave its eggs alone, it's fine.
Well, and it's so funny because the closing monologue for Karl is just like, if you're ever riding the subway and see something weird, you're going to die. It's a lizard monster. I'm like, okay.
And that's it. Yeah, and that's it.
It's such a weird... I mean, I won't lie. How bad that lizard outfit was very funny to watch. Like, It made the episode way more entertaining than it should have been.
Yeah, I think it was... Sometimes it's hard to guess, but I think even for 1974, I think it looked bad.
I think we've seen costumes on this show before, and they haven't all been like top notch, but they've all been... This episode in particular stinks of we're not coming back next week.
Yeah, agreed. You know what it actually looked a little bit like? Do you remember that weird TV movie we watched where at the end it was that rich family, and they were worshiping a demon, and the demon ended up being this lizard guy for like one split second at the very end?
Oh, that was that Gene Roddenberry special.
Yeah. It looked very similar to that. It may be the same costume.
Well, I mean, at least in the Gene Roddenberry special, they knew not to stare. Like they avoided using it. They cut most of it out of the movie because they're like, this doesn't work at all. This one, they're just like, whatever, just show it. Who cares? Who cares? We're not. This is the last episode anyone's ever going to make of this show.
Yeah. Now, I'll say this before we even get to the ratings. I like this episode better than the last one. You may not agree with me, but it was not a strong one to end on. Like, it's not like they were like, hey guys, let's all pull together and really knock it out of the park for this last one. It's like, nah, one more of these.
Yeah. You could tell everyone's waiting to go home.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Jordan, do you have any final notes, or should we just get to the ratings?
Let's ratings, and then I'd love to know where we're sitting for Kolchak.
Of course. So the youth killer Helena of Troy is on the prowl for young people.
I don't know why I disliked this episode as much as I did. I think part of it is just, look, I think even in the end, if you just watch this fresh and hadn't watched a previous 18 episodes, I don't think it's very good. But I just think after watching so many Kolchak episodes, this is so paint by the numbers, and it's not even a very good paint by the numbers. I didn't like this episode 3 out of 10. Which is probably meaner than it needs to be and a little harsher. I'm tired of episodes like this. Like, you guys can do better.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of just like, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't age well in the episode A, which is like a little like hard to watch at times. And then, yeah, very much in the paint by numbers formula. It was fun at the beginning when you got to watch a couple of these actors get old really quick. But those were
that's about it, though.
It's the first 5 minutes. That's the highlight of the episode. I'm also going to give it a 3.
Yeah, not a good one.
Well, that just leaves the century.
Now, this episode, I liked more. I don't think it's a great episode, but for whatever reason, I was kind of tickled by how silly the dinosaur lizard thing looked. And I did like, there was hints of things that were better. The stuff with the police officer was dumb, and it was overly complicated. And as I pointed at the beginning, I don't know why you needed all these. This company has secret water people, and there's the government, and they've got mining, but they also do security, and it's like, this is way too much, guys. But I still kind of like the episode. I'm going to give it a higher score than it probably deserves. It's the last episode. We're done with Kolchak. 6 out of 10.
6 out of 10. Yeah, honestly, It's a very silly episode. I like how absurdly complicated it is. I like how bad the monster looks. Its biggest flaw is just like how much it leans into like a lady detective. That's dumb. Like that's kind of its biggest flaw, I would say, which is too bad because the rest of it is so silly and like campy and like just it's badly made in the way that's kind of fun, even though like that's not what they intended. But I think I'm gonna like just end on a 5. It's a straight 5, I think.
Yeah. Well, why don't we punch it into the Continuum Drag computer and see where we're at? I know we're above a 5. I know that.
You got it. Let me punch it in. All right, Jordan. Do you want to know the final score for Kolchak, the Night Stalker? The final series rating?
6.38.
6.38 is what you're guessing, huh?
Yeah.
It is 5.83.
Ooh, lower than I'd think.
I'm surprised to see it that low too, but I think what it is there's so many real duds that it really counterweighs any of the ones that kind of work.
Well, that's the thing. So, once we finish a series like that, the question becomes, would you recommend this show? I'm going to say for me, I would recommend this show if this is in your sort of wheelhouse. However, I would say there's probably about maybe 6 episodes that you'd probably watch and you'd get the show and you'd be like, this is a fun show. But I wouldn't watch all 20.
Yeah, I agree. I would find a best of list and just watch the first like 4 to 6. And then I think you're fine. If you're really into it, you can keep going. But I think you're just like, it's diminishing returns for sure.
Yeah, because really once you get the formula, I would say half the episodes are pretty much the same show. Like it's like, oh, the monster's slightly different and he might see a different painting, but it's pretty much the same show, which is its greatest flaw, because those episodes that are a little better are just bend that formula a little bit and it works better.
Yeah, I mean they will fool you into thinking that this is a show that had legs and was unjustly canceled, but if you watch that as a whole, you'll be like, well, this should have ended.
Yeah, because how many more times can the exact same thing happen? It's not like, again, there's things that you could have done to cover some of those holes, which is have a partner with him that changes the dynamic for the episode, or have him go to a different locale so he doesn't have his informants. Little things like that would have kept it fresher, but they, for whatever reason, were like, this is what the episode is. You can't change it. That it has to happen. An A, B, C, D has to happen. It's just like, and it's kind of a bummer because, again, Darren McGavin is great. It's a fun character. And when it works, it's really entertaining. But a lot of times you're just like, oh, this is a fun character in a really boring episode.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. As I think in any episode you watch, you'll probably find some great character moments that Darren McGavin's bringing to the show. But they largely have nothing to do with what's happening in the episode or what's going on. They're just like, he's fun to watch as this character, but the rest of it sometimes does not follow suit.
Yeah. So I would say our overall ranking based on our episodes is probably lower than I would give it if someone asked me what I actually thought about the show, because again, you sort of remember the better ones.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like it. I think perhaps it is showing the true nature of Kolchak, that 5, that low 5.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, Jordan, that's the end of Kolchak. That's it.
Until we watch the 2005 edition.
Oh, yeah, right. Oh, forgot about that. Well, until then, Jordan, listener, you can email us at continuumdrag@gmail.com if you want to get a hold of us. And on Instagram and Twitter, we will have some clips from these 2 episodes. And there's some fun clips from both of these episodes, I think. Oh, people getting old. Bad lizard monster.
People getting old.
Everyone loves to watch it.
Yeah. The one you were right though, the editing of the girl exercising on the balcony, that was fun.
Yeah, that was a well done version of that for sure.
Yeah.
You can find those at Continuum Drag as the handle on those platforms, and that wraps it up. So Jordan, something, and listener, something else. What do I say?
You say like see you next time, and then I'm like, what a real bow wow.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye. Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Rex Seidler. Produced by Jordan Dullock and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Hughes.